What up, HyperChange? Welcome to another episode. Super stoked. Got a special guest, Rob from Tesla Daily, by far my favorite Tesla podcast. So I'm going to recap crazy news. It's like 9 p.m. in New York City right now. We just got together to recap our thoughts. Rob happened to be in town. Tesla's privatization has been all over the news. So I'm going to give a really quick recap about what actually happened today, and then we're going to trade our thoughts and analysis, the pros and cons of the situation. So this all started about 9 hours ago when earlier today, Elon Musk tweets, "Am considering taking Tesla private at $420, period. Funding secured. Period." So the market freaks out. Everybody is sort of going crazy about this. I mean, as we know, Elon Musk has sort of been fed up with being a public company for a while, but this just came out of nowhere. And then he starts replying to people's tweets. I tweeted back at him immediately because I was totally surprised by this news and said, "No, still processing what this means, but would be sad to see all the investors who've been with Tesla miss out on the upside over the next few years. Although if this helped the mission and Elon thinks it's smart, I understand and fully support." Elon then replies, "My hope is all current investors remain with Tesla even if we're private, would create special purpose fund, enabling anyone to stay with Tesla, already do this with Fidelity's SpaceX investment." So now we're in a crazy situation. Tesla stock gets halted. It's already up 10% on the day to 360 something per share. Then towards the end of the day, around 3:30, 4 p.m. Eastern, they publish an email that was sent to employees earlier in the day that basically goes into detail about taking Tesla private, is the name of the blog post. And it goes into detail with the strategy they had and sort of breaks down their thinking and basically says that Tesla is trying to go private. This will shield them from the media and short-term thinking. They can focus on the long term. It'll be the best thing for the company. There's a few more nuggets in here that we'll get to later, but this has totally caught the world by surprise, I think, or the Tesla community. Yeah. And so I'm just curious, like, Rob, what were your first thoughts and first reaction when you heard this news?
Yeah, so as podcast listeners know, I mean, I've been traveling for work this week, obviously, so catching up on this in between meetings, I was shocked. I mean, at first the question with any Elon tweet is whether or not he's joking with you or not, especially I think with the 420 connection. Like, people were wondering about that. Is this just a weird Elon joke?
Yeah, did he get hacked?
Did he get hacked? I think CNBC, that was kind of their thesis, like right off the bat. So,
classic.
Yeah, so I mean, I was just trying to understand if this was something that was serious from Elon. 90% of the time when Elon tweets something like this, people are like, you're just kidding, Elon, and then it ends up being true. We've seen it with the Boring Company with the flamethrowers, things like that. Many other examples that I'm not thinking of right now, but we've seen this time and again from Elon, so immediately I perked up and, I took it seriously off the bat. And yeah, I mean, it's just a lot to process. I think we've known for a long time that Elon would prefer Tesla to be private. He's talked about that a lot in the past. So
yeah, and maybe dive deeper there, because I feel like that's something that I feel like the media really missed, is like, this has been a sentiment that Elon and Tesla have had for quite some time. It's almost said he regrets going public.
Right, and I think the only reason they really went public is they felt like at that point in time they needed to, because they needed the capital. Mm-hmm. And now we've seen a shift with Tesla and with Elon. They don't feel like they need capital. They feel like they're in the point in time now where Model 3 is going to be profitable. That's going to be enough to drive the growth that they need, and they're not constrained by capital, as Elon talked about on the last call, one of the questions that you actually asked about. So without that capital constraint, really for them to be in the public market invites a lot of the attacking that we've seen from short sellers. Of course, the media eats that up because negative headlines are going to drive more clicks, more revenue. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of that plays into the disadvantages of, being in the public world, whereas privatization, you don't have to worry about that, and there's really no incentive for Tesla to be public if they're not going to use that to raise capital.
Yeah, totally. So diving into what's actually happening here, and what's so interesting to me is that Elon has basically indicated, or it sounds like us as shareholders will have the option, and this is totally unlike most buyouts or any buyout I've heard of, to stay in the company while it gets privatized. So we don't actually have to sell our shares. We'll have the option to sell our shares at $420 if this deal goes through. And it's important to mention that this is just something they're considering. The board would need to vote on it. Elon doesn't have control. It's not a done deal. This is just what they are saying they want to happen, essentially. But we have the option to stay on as shareholders, and that was something I totally didn't see coming. And so now all my questions in my head are swirling okay, this is at $420 per share. We're looking at 70-something billion market cap. Where's the capital from that coming? Do they need to put up all 70 billion because people like me are going to hold on to their stock? So I just have so many questions, because I feel like a deal like this is I've never heard of a deal like this being done,
Yeah, we were just checking and we looked up, biggest private buyouts, and we didn't see anything bigger than this. So I think this would be the biggest scale private buyout in existence. I mean, obviously people can fact check us on that, but I didn't see anything just in a quick review of it. So we're kind of in unprecedented territory here. Obviously, the short interest in Tesla complicates that. We're at 34.7 million shares shorted right now. So that's obviously huge short interest, unprecedented. Tesla, in terms of dollar volume shorted, is the highest shorted stock on the market right now. So a lot of unique dynamics, as you mentioned, playing into this. Personally, extremely excited that Elon's gonna, sounds like, do everything that he can to make sure that investors that have been with the company for a long time have that ability to continue to maintain ownership as they take Tesla private. Because that was my big concern right away, seeing that 420 number. Like, obviously, that's not what I'm in Tesla stock for. That's not what I've been holding Tesla stock for since 2013.
Agreed.
I think you're in line with me on that. There's a lot more upside beyond that.
So you would hold.
I would definitely. So
you would hold through this.
If I were to have my shares taken away from me at 420 per share, I would be extremely disappointed in that. Obviously, it's a positive return. You know, you can only
that would be an all-time high for Tesla.
It'd be an all-time high, by 8%ish, I think. Obviously, it'd be a win, but we're looking for a lot bigger win, and I think a lot of shareholders echo that sentiment. So, for me to have that option to continue to hold those shares in a private entity would be exciting. It's not something that I know a ton about, so a lot of learning that I think is going to take place for a lot of the Tesla community as people kind of examine that decision here over the next few days, weeks, whatever it may be. But for me, I would be looking to take a significant portion, if not all of my shares into the privatization.
Yeah, and so what's really interesting about the privatization is, you mentioned, but Elon has a couple tweets where he really clearly says here, like, am super appreciative of Tesla shareholders, will ensure their prosperity in any scenario. He has another tweet here, death, no forced sales, hope all shareholders remain, will be way smoother and less disruptive as a private company, ends negative propaganda from shorts. So he's encouraging those people who, like us, who've been with the company, that we have the ability to stay on. And to me, beyond the size of the buyout, that's the surprising part. And what that means for, maybe if you're at home watching, is, according to the blog post here with taking Tesla private, they're going to have liquidity events, every about 6 months or so. And that's something that's very common for large private companies when they allow their employees to liquidate. SpaceX does these rounds where they allow accredited investors to buy in when employees sell at a fixed price. And so you probably would still have that option, and that's how you would cash out of your future Tesla shares if you wanted to. And so that to me is a little bit of a step backward in terms of liquidity versus Tesla now trading every day.
Yep,
this is why I love being on the companies going on the public markets. Their financials are transparent. We see what the price is. It's a gut check on the company. They have to have conference calls. It's a pain sometimes and maybe frustrating and a slog, but I think in some ways there's a reason why that corporate governance is there, and that's why it makes me a little sad to see Tesla go private. So I don't know. Do you have any comments on that, of like the liquidity?
I think that would be the big concern. Obviously, I think it's less of a concern for long-term investors that intend to hold their shares for 5-10 years, which I consider myself to be one of those people. So for me, the liquidity is, I suppose, less of concern. But anytime you have an illiquid stock and you don't necessarily know what the value of that is day to day, I think it can be a little bit concerning to have a large amount of your portfolio in something like that, where if something changes, you don't have the ability to easily get out of that position. So I think that's a concern for many people, I think wisely. And as you mentioned, there's just less visibility into what's happening with the company. We're not going to get as much news on Tesla if it's not a public company. So we're going to have a lot less visibility into certainly the day-to-day and even the quarter-to-quarter of what's happening with the company.
Yeah, and even just beyond, like, if they try and make it accessible to investors in the company, to me what adds so much value and why I love what Tesla's doing is it's showing all the young people out there. It's a case study of an amazing company being built at such an intense time from the ground up. Having the access to watch that, I think, is an incredible learning experience. So that, as like a business case study nerd, makes me sad that will go away for all the young people. And what I think is even more interesting in this letter that they post is, in the future, Elon says, in the future, once Tesla enters a phase of slower, more predictable growth, it will likely make sense to return to the public markets. So they don't actually even envision keeping Tesla private forever. It's almost like they just want to get to a more mature phase of the company. That part I thought was really, really interesting. So I'm curious if you have any insight from that of like a potential future Tesla IPO.
Yeah, and it's tough to say on that because I would envision that being many years from now. So it's tough for me to even like get excited about it at this point just because it's so far out there.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, I think Tesla becomes still a very interesting company, but probably less interesting than the period of time that we're in now. And that's kind of what they're saying there in that statement is like, once things are, you know, a little bit more calmed down and we're operating more like a traditional company, and things are a little bit more predictable, then that's the time to be back in the public market, which I think totally makes sense because then you're less prone to things that we've seen play out in the media, negative sentiment impacting the business and things like that, being a distraction to employees, which is something that they called out in their letter there too. Mm-hmm. It totally makes sense for that to be a future case, but at the same time, when that does happen, Tesla's just going to be less interesting to follow at that point. Still interesting, but just not as much. Right now, Tesla, like you get it. We cover Tesla really closely.
It would be bad for our channels if Tesla was private. Elon.
What am I going to talk about?
Right? It's moving on a little. The next thing I'm thinking of is $70 billion is a ton of money. Like you mentioned, biggest buyout ever. Who's paying for that? There's also the weird component of Elon owns 20%. How many shareholders own how much that aren't selling? So maybe you don't need the full $70 billion. So my question is, it seems like the ownership and like Elon being CEO and running it will stay the same operationally. But I'm curious, how do you think the ownership changes? Who's selling? Who's buying? Where's the capital coming from?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I don't think we have really great answers for that yet. But as you said, like, with this being a $70 billion plus buyout, with Tesla and Elon communicating that they will be taking some shareholders along with that, that means that the shares that do come along don't need to be bought out. So that's, for every share that doesn't want to sell, that's $420 less of capital that they need to have to buy those shares.
So they won't need the full 70.
Yeah, so if 100% of shareholders just came in and said, yep, 420, like we're going into private equity, then Tesla would effectively not have to raise any capital, would be my understanding of it. They could just take it private with the vote. So,
but when Elon says funding secured, that's what makes me curious of who is in the back pocket, because it sounds like they have, and people have even mentioned, I hate to be like the Chanos in the room of like, he's like an SEC violation of market manipulation by saying there's funding secured if there's not.
Right.
So then this is catch-22 of, I don't know if that's right or not, but
I would think it would be. I mean, that would be
I would think that if you're a CEO, definitely don't tweet funding for a buyout if you don't have it. Elon, if you're listening, probably not a good idea, maybe too late for that advice.
Yeah.
But seriously, so my guess would be, okay, Saudi Arabia took between a 3 to 5% stake in the company, worth about $2 billion recently. They have a massive sovereign wealth fund. They want to invest in the future, renewable tech. Maybe it's them. SoftBank Vision Fund. They have absurd amounts of capital. They would do something crazy like this. So those are kind of more VC-style entities that I think could be attacking this. Then you have, Tencent already owns 5% of Tesla. They're the largest tech company in China, or one of them.
Yep.
And then I'm thinking U.S. tech. Okay, we got Google. They almost bought Tesla in 2013. Larry and Sergey, friends with Elon. Maybe they're providing it. They could team up with Waymo in the private markets, make something happen there. Apple, we know Project Titan. Bezos can never rule him out. So I'm curious, that's just like the free flowing, what runs in my mind of like, who's got even remotely enough money to do this?
Yeah. So in reality, it's probably some combination of many different pieces, maybe a lot of those pieces that you mentioned. I think, to me, Tencent makes sense, Google makes sense, as you said, Larry Page and Elon have close relationship. Larry Page in the past has said that instead of giving his money to charity, he feels like it would be a better use of his capital to just give it to Elon in terms of actually benefiting the world. So we know that there's a close connection there. And as we talked about, like, you don't necessarily need, like, you don't need to buy every share for $420 per share. You just need to say, you need to have someone say that they would do it. Yeah. So if Larry Page was like, if it came to that, yes, I would buy every share of Tesla for 420 shares minus Elon shares minus all the other insiders and whatever it may be. And then in fruition, maybe if this were to happen, it would only be half of that actually the capital is needed for. But like you said,
that's still $35 billion though,
it's
right?
Still a lot of money, and you still need to have someone that would commit up to that $70 billion.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it's a lot of capital.
I'm also thinking, what about a bank?
A lot of different sources.
Maybe like some bank financing this, securitized by Tesla's assets somehow. Like maybe there's something like that going. They're taking on some big debt.
Yeah,
like an LBO situation.
China is probably an option there. They've talked about using local debt in China to fund the gigafactory, so that we know that they've probably had conversations with banks in China already. That gets a little bit beyond my expertise, but certainly there are a lot of possibilities for where this capital could be coming from. Okay, I want to go on a quick moonshot tangent, because this just made me think of this. I think Waymo, Google, they're, like we just said, they're already friends. Like, imagine if,
they bought Tesla, they continued what they were doing with the consumer piece of the company, for high-end people, and then accelerated it because Waymo's been desperate for a good EV to plug into its self-driving autonomous network. They have the software, they're buying iPaces. Those are just whack. I mean, Chrysler Pacifica hybrid minivans running on, fossil fuels. Like, Tesla is the most efficient EVs by far in the industry. It's the best tech there, the best autonomous tech combined with Google. Like, there's so many synergies I see. And if Elon really wants to spread the mission of Tesla and actually accelerate the transition, the fastest way, team up with your homies and then Sergey and Larry and actually put it into Waymo because now Tesla's, public, Waymo, they're separate entities. They sort of have this beef, even though it's a no-brainer to get Teslas on Waymo's network. So I feel like there's a huge synergy right there, and that would make me finally get excited about this of okay, now there's some hope because there's a reason why they're doing this. This is going to accelerate the mission. Google has $100 billion in cash. They have that $70 billion covered. So that's kind of my moonshies. I would love if Waymo did it.
Yeah. I think it makes sense. The only hesitation I would have would be that Waymo and Tesla are pursuing such different paths from autonomous driving and the development there. Obviously, Waymo is heavily reliant on LiDAR. Tesla is obviously avoiding that path. So I feel like it's just they're very divergent in the directions that they're heading there. So to combine them under, and they would still be separate entities, obviously, but to...
Yeah, They've said very clear, Elon's been very clear that he doesn't think LiDAR is the right approach. Google's been very clear that they do think that is. So they have to overcome that difference. But I almost feel like if you're really in it for the betterment of this technology, then testing simultaneously those technologies at the same time and propelling both those initiatives, which would be happening anyway, is the smart move. And
one of the things I also wonder about is if it were entirely Google, I feel like that would create some sort of conflict of interest, right, between Google's stake in Tesla and their actual development of their own fully self-driving technology. I don't know.
Well, Google, what's so interesting is they've invested in Uber, they've invested in Lyft.
True, but those are minority positions, right? Whereas if they were funding this, let's say half their shareholders keep it and we end up being $35 billion in capital is what's needed. Let's just say that, for example. So then all of a sudden, Google owns half of Tesla, that would be crazy. And I don't think that Elon would probably want to position Tesla that way because he would lose, so much control of the company if this capital was coming from, one specific source, like Google in this case, where they just immediately own half of the company, What are your thoughts on that? Because I feel like it would make more sense for Elon to kind of parse the company up into smaller pieces so that he maintains a greater amount of control.
If he's a little bit worried, but if there's some behind the scenes deal of him and Larry because they're actually friends coming together, being let's just solve this transportation issue, then that is where I see the synergies. Otherwise, I think strategically I would be with you with what Elon's thinking of let's give a little to the Saudis, let's give a little to SoftBank, let's give a little to Google. I'm still going to be the majority. A ton of my retail guys who are loyal to me are going to be the majority. I'm still going to be running the show. So I think those are the two options. Either he's got one guy in the back pocket that is his partner and that Tesla wants to get into bed with, or I like your idea, they want to fragment it to make it so they still have control, or Elon still has control.
Right.
All right, Rob. So digesting this news a little bit, as a Tesla shareholder, as a fan of the company, what are your thoughts? Are you more bullish? Are you less bullish? Does this change your stance of Tesla? Do you continue to want to be a shareholder?
Yep.
What are your personal thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough decision, as we talked about, I think, a little bit. I would definitely intend to take some of my position into private equity. That would be definitely a new space for me. I've never been...
the new private Tesla,
you
wouldn't sell, at least a piece of it.
At least a piece of it I would take forward into the new private Tesla, for sure.
Okay.
So I don't want to lose that upside that I think Tesla has over the next 5 to 10 years. Mm-hmm. We both talked about that many times. I don't think we need to get into details on why, but I don't want to lose that upside for $420 a share. Obviously, that's a nice return here in a week or two, whatever it may be. But I think to give up that upside to use that capital in potentially more liquid investments just doesn't have the appeal to me. There's not another company.
So why wouldn't you just put all of it in?
So.
Or I didn't want to cut you off.
No.
Good point there.
I think that's a really good question. So I think that one of the reasons would just be my uncertainty of how this all works. So I've never, like I said, never been invested in a company in that way. To have I guess it's a significant portion of my portfolio. So to have that much tied up in an illiquid entity would be, I don't know, potentially a little bit more risky, you know.
So just like fear of the unknown, kind of. Just like we don't know how this works.
It's kind of like de-risking.
Maybe I won't be able to access my capital, which today I can sell if I really need to.
Exactly. And maybe once I, digest this over the next few days, maybe I'll feel a little bit more comfortable in terms of what percentage. I don't really have anything in mind right now. Still wanting to see how this plays out over the next few days. I think I would definitely intend to take some of that into that. That being said, in terms of whether this is bullish for Tesla, bearish for Tesla, whatever it may be, my initial reaction to the news was disappointed, of course, when I thought that 420 was kind of the end of it. Then I was, excited. I was excited to learn that they are taking it private, followed by a lot of confusion with, okay, what exactly does that mean? How does that impact my option positions, things like that. So now that I've digested that, I think, it's kind of neutral-ish, I guess. I still have some of those feelings of like, this is disappointing, but I guess I'm not sure that I can articulate quite why I feel that way.
Feel that.
Yeah. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm going to be keeping all my shares into the, into the private entity just because I already set aside, like, this is my long-term investment in Tesla, and I'm sort of, just because I have a lot of friends who do these private sales with, big startups, like, I trust that there will be liquidity, even though it'll be less frequently, like, I'm not too worried about that, and, like you said, like, my Twitter bio, hodling till $1 trillion, I think the upside is massive, and I think we're in the early innings of what Tesla wants to become. And so, I love to bet on the jockey, not the horse. Elon Musk is 47. I mean, the guy has, 4 decades left of innovating, unless he goes to Mars before that, or what, I don't know. But I just think we're so early that I want to stay along with the ride. Tesla's product roadmap, I think this is a multi-100 billion, if not trillion-dollar company, so I'm holding on for that upside. The flip side of it is I'm bummed. Like you're saying, there's like a low sentiment of disappointment because it feels like a give in by Elon and Tesla. It feels like they caved it, and because they
I don't feel that way.
Okay, maybe this is just me speaking for me though. Is I feel like they caved to the shorts in the media, and that's fine. But I just think they took it too personally, and that wasn't driving the stock price. That wasn't driving the business. It was just getting to management, C-suite, Elon's head that there was this negativity, and that's why they're shutting it down. And like, it just frustrates me because the end goal is a race to zero. It's a race to liquidity. It's a race to trading every day. It's a race to transparency. That's the future of corporations. And so to see Tesla go private is a step back. Maybe they'll commit to quarterly earnings call and be the only private company that does that, but I doubt it. Will they commit to sharing as much information in their financials as they do today? I would be shocked as well. And just as I said before, as a business nerd, student, this is a case study that I think is giving so much people value, and it's just like so empowering, and I'm so passionate about being involved with Tesla and following it as a public company and as a shareholder. I go to the shareholder meeting every year. Like, that's a pilgrimage that I was looking forward to making every year for the next 50 years. Those are just things that I'm worried about because it's going private, and I just think at the end of the day, there's bad things that come with the scrutiny, which is the media, the shorts, whatever, but there's good things, which is the transparency and scrutiny can also be a gut check that I think can be very valuable. I'm not saying Tesla will lose that, but so that's my era of disappointment. But at the end of the day, this doesn't change the business. The Model 3 is exactly what it was yesterday. Everything's still the same. Elon's still doing it. If anything, it proves they can get as much money as they need to. So it doesn't change the future, but as a finance nerd, it just feels like a loss. So I'm curious. You said you don't think it seems like a given, or you have a
I don't. So let's talk about
where
that.
does your disappointment come from, or
So let's talk about the caving in part first. So this is like the best way to cave in that you can imagine, right? You're forcing shorts to close out their positions at Tesla's all-time high. So like that's pretty much the best like exit scenario for Tesla if they're going to exit. So I think that's a win for Tesla and for Elon in terms of sticking to the short burn of the century, whatever. We'll see what happens here. But I think if they close out at 420, like, checkmark victory for Tesla, I think on that. So the other points that you made, I think you hit on probably the reason that I am feeling disappointed is because this is a company that I've followed extremely closely. It's been a lot of fun to follow. Like, I've learned so much from doing this. The Tesla community is awesome. And I feel like this takes a little bit away from that because we're not going to have as much news. We're not going to have as much visibility. So to be as interested in something that you don't have as much information on is going to be difficult. And I think that's It's kind of like, your friend is moving away or something like that. It's like, this is a bummer. Maybe this friend has a great opportunity, but they're going to be 3,000 miles away now. Like, shoot, I'm a little bit bummed by that.
No, I love that. It's almost like there's a boxing fight going on of like fossil fuels, Tesla, and like it was on TV and we were all watching, and now it just got shut off and we have like a shitty radio signal. Right. And that's all we can hear. And we missed the greatest fight in the history of boxing, but it wasn't boxing, it was business, and millions of people could have gathered info from that case study, but they've closed it. They've regressed on transparency,
Which is disappointing for us as onlookers and investors in the company to lose that transparency that we really enjoyed having. So in terms of just like my own personal investment, I'm feeling that disappointment as like an onlooker, and obviously as an investor it sucks to lose that visibility too, but now that I'm thinking about it and kind of separating those feelings a little bit, I probably will take a big portion of what I've got in Tesla into the private equity, because as you said, nothing really changes for the business. If anything, this probably improves the business because they're able to focus more on the longer term. They're not having to meet those quarterly requirements, which we've seen time and time again impact the business, whether it's stockpiling cars in the US for delivery at the end of the quarter, which leads to a lot of logistics challenges. Whatever it may be, they're able to now focus on those longer term milestones that are more important and operate to optimize for that rather than each quarter. So I think that's a win. I think having less negativity from people that are incentivized to attack Tesla as a business, I think it's a good thing. The media can kind of just move on from Tesla's financials. Like, we'll occasionally hear things about Uber's financials and stuff like that. I think that's going to be a really good comparison now for Tesla as we go into this private equity space, because it's obviously where Uber's at, of a similar valuation too. So I think that's going to be interesting.
The other thing I'm even thinking about is how many of Tesla's shareholders eventually became customers, and that was a stepping stone in towards accessing the company and making it feel like you were a part of the movement. Right. So I wonder if that's another angle of that. Also makes me a little sad, is like that grassroots angle of like some kid. Like, I even just recently met up with the HyperChanger, who is like 15 years old and somehow got finally one Tesla share, and like, this is a customer, like this is, I think that is the future of the company. And so are they losing that stepping stone?
Yeah, it's harder for the little guy to get involved and feel like an owner of the company, which makes you an advocate for the company, which obviously is hugely important for Tesla. That's a big part of where they've gotten to today, has been that advocacy from owners, from shareholders, employees, things like that. So that's been a huge part of it. We'll still see that in some aspect from owners, obviously, of the vehicles. We just won't see it as much from owners of the company, and you're not as invested in, to your point. So it's a little bit disappointing.
If to press you on, put you on the spot for a last moment thing, what if you had like 30 seconds or a minute to say to Elon, like give him some advice? Maybe you wouldn't say anything because you just think this is the right move, but like, what would you say? What would be like your first thing? Be like, don't do this, or like, make sure you do that, or with the buyout. Like, what would there be anything?
I tend to avoid giving advice to Elon because that just is ridiculous, except for his use of Twitter. I think you could give some advice on use of Twitter, but aside from anything else, business management, like I'm gonna defer to Elon 100 times out of 100. So if this is the move that he thinks is the right move, as an investor, that's the move that I think is the right move.
Okay, but as someone who is like a retail shareholder who cares, you trust it. You're just saying, Elon, do whatever you think is best. I don't care. I have nothing to say.
Yeah, I mean, I trust it. Maybe that's ignorant of me, but over the 5 years, over the 5 years that I've been following this company every single day, reading about it multiple hours every single day, if this is the move Elon thinks is the right move, then it's the right move.
Yeah, and I guess to counterpoint, my 2 cents to Elon would be like to just keep it transparent. Whatever you do, earnings calls, keep the input, like make sure the customers are involved and can be a part of the story, and the story's transparent, because I think that adds so much value. And frankly, I think keeping the company public in the long run will be the smart move. And we're 2 months away from that KO punch where every single short seller who is the loud, obnoxious person is going to go out of business, because this isn't going to 420. It's going to 520, 620, and they'll all be a joke, and everyone's going to think twice about shorting Tesla, and like, that'll be such a public victory that I was so excited to take a part of. I don't know, I read the letter of taking Tesla private, and to me the biggest reason to do it is because you're worried that you're focusing on the short term because you're public and you want to focus on the long term. look at Amazon.com. Like if you want to hold a rock concert, advertise it as a rock concert, say you're investing for the future, say you're not going to make earnings, say you're investing for 10 or 20 years. You can do that on the public markets. I don't understand the reason to take it private. Like, to me, that's not a valid, like, I get that there's heat, but who cares? That the stock's almost at an all-time high. You know, the money in the market is saying, we're validating Tesla's business model, they're executing, we're going to continue to drive the stock higher. It's about to go to all-time highs on its own without this news, in my opinion. So I just feel like, even if they just waited 6 months, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's...
No, I think that's an awesome point. My only challenge to that would be, what's the incentive for Tesla to stay public? If it's just to, like, prove the doubters wrong as they achieve these milestones that we think they can achieve, what is the advantage to them being public if they're not going to raise any capital?
Tesla being public may be their single best marketing strategy, because it permeates so deeply to getting people who are 15 invested in the company, to having people that are invested follow the news every day, to study it more and more. Like, I think being public and open sourcing the case study of Tesla's disruption is, in a weird way, their biggest marketing tactic, and that's why people like me are so fascinated and passionate about the company, is because we know the story. The transparency, although they think it's been their biggest weakness, in my opinion, has been their biggest strength, because that's what has allowed this grassroots movement to grow. And so I think Tesla going, how many free headlines does Tesla get because they're public, because they have a stock? That's hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of free marketing that they're flushing down the toilet by going private. So, and I think that's just scratching the surface of how deep being public permeates a connection with society that they're going away from.
Yeah.
So...
No, those are fair points.
So... Anything you want to say, Rob? I'm stoked. I feel like we had a great podcast.
Yeah,
I'm stoked to have you on. And I'm a
great.
little bit bummed that it took this Tesla news to get you on, because
we
for
didn't think this would be
HyperChangers,
like...
I've been trying to get Rob on the podcast for every single time he comes to New York, and it finally worked, so I'm stoked. But it took mega Tesla news.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't think this would be our first cross-collaboration.
We didn't think, but on the spot, we had to do it.
We've had some ideas about collaborating before, and they were in the works, but this kind of, accelerated those plans a little bit.
Definitely. And we also want to do a Q&A of questions, sort of like I did on the previous podcast, but like your Tesla questions answered by me and Rob, or Rob and I, so maybe that could be something in the future.
Yeah, we can do that on the podcast for sure. Sure. And then maybe next time, because I feel like people are going to have a lot of questions coming out of this, so maybe we can, do
follow up
right out of this.
I'm sure there'll be more news to hit.
Yeah.
That will hit, that we need to digest.
All right, so let's close off with this then. So, do we think there's any chance that this fails and Tesla stays public?
I hope they decide to stay public. Not because it fails, but because Elon watches this podcast.
He watches it. It's like,
That's my moonshot. He's like, Gal, you made a couple solid points.
Really good point about
Fuck
that.
it, we're staying public.
Okay. In reality, though, what do you think odds are that this doesn't happen? And I know, so we're just completely guessing here. Like, obviously, this is unprecedented kind of stuff, but just gut feeling.
I think in Elon's mind, he wants it to happen, which means it is very likely to happen. But I also think Elon is not 100% convinced that it's the right move and hasn't gone full into the table. So I think barring some sort of major change in his ideology, Tesla will go private and will push forward. But I still think there's a window to change his thought process on what's important and what's not, and why this is the right move.
I would agree. I think that if Elon is putting this out there in the world, this is what he thinks will happen. I would say the only thing that makes me doubt this deal going through would be, as we talked about, if the share price significantly exceeds that $420 per share prior to the vote happening, in which case they need to raise the offer level. And if the share price is too high, where the equity that they have that would be coming in no longer would be a part of that deal, then, like, let's say Tesla goes up to $600 a share or something like that. Wild speculation. If the people that are coming to the table at $420 per share are now saying $600, we can't do that, then the deal, I feel like, would kind of fall apart. Obviously, that would have impacts on Tesla's share price then too, but that would be something that I could see happening. But if that were to happen, I think that's still a positive result for Tesla, because what they're doing through that is they're showing that there's a floor on the stock of $420 per share. So that's beneficial for the entirety of Tesla going forward, because everybody knows 420 is the floor then. So it's going to be the lower band of your trading channel. And then the other thing that it does is it makes shorts have this little freak out here needing to cover, and then shorts would then understand that this is a possible scenario for them going forward, and maybe in a couple of years it's $700 per share. Elon would be highlighting the fact that he has people that are willing to take Tesla private under the correct circumstances. So that would be also a positive outcome to this action that would not necessarily be Tesla going private. So I feel like Elon could be looking at it and viewing the possible outcomes and saying, okay, either go private or we put a floor on Tesla and we decrease the short interest significantly, and probably also this is kind of like a warning shot to them.
Yeah, it's a win-win. Even if he doesn't want to do it.
So even if the vote fails, like you said, win-win.
Interesting.
So maybe
that's a great
even
insight.
so, which of those outcomes is actually the desired outcome? I think you could
maybe not going public and we go to 500.
Maybe Elon doesn't actually want to go private through this deal. Maybe he wants to, diminish short interest and put a floor on this stock.
He's just sort of bluffing and saying like, if we wanted to, this is what could happen.
Right, which would also be an acceptable outcome too. So it's like, okay, if that doesn't happen, then we go private, and Elon's fine with that. I tend to think that more so that Elon just wants to go private based on what he's said in the past. So I think that's a little bit more of like a kind of an out there theory. And it could be like, okay, 95% of Elon is like, let's just go private. The other 5% is like, okay, if the private vote doesn't go through for X, Y, or Z reason, then we also have this potential outcome.
It means we're worth more than $4.20 per share, which is also good.
Right.
To prove to our shareholders.
Exactly. And you squeeze the shorts, which we know Elon feels personally vindictive, I would say, against the shorts. He's extremely bothered by the fact that people would bet against the company, would put these negative pieces of news out there that in many cases are completely false, just to try to destroy Tesla as a company and obviously their noble mission of accelerating the advent of sustainable energy.
Yeah. I think and it's just like, I think that shit will continue if they go private, and then what the hell is the point? You just decrease. That's like what's in the back of my head is like, I don't know. I hate it. Just like it's like some Bezos stuff of like, focus on your customer, not your competition. It just feels like Tesla's focusing on their shorts, not their long-term investors, which just seems like a parallel version of that fallacy.
Yeah.
And that's
my 2 cents.
Put
your head down, execute.
Yeah, put your head down, execute. Everything else is gonna kill it. The
Yeah.
stock's almost near all-time highs. You're worth $60 billion. You haven't made a single dime in profit. Like, screw the media. Spiegel's not driving the stock price, clearly. Like, you're raising as much money as you want on whoever's, So,
Yeah.
Anyway, that is what it is. But every hyperchanger, follow Rob's podcast. I've shouted out a ton of times. Tesla Daily. It's my favorite Tesla podcast. So hopefully we'll do
any
more
of the
content.
podcasting apps, you should be able to find it there. Just search for Tesla Daily. Who knows what that's going to look like going forward? We may need to, adjust the dailiness of it or whatever it may be. But certainly while this plays out, once I get back into Milwaukee, I'll definitely be doing it daily. Keeping us updated on this, and then follow me on Twitter too. Me and Gally do a lot of back and forth there. At
Solid tweets.
At Tesla Podcast, yeah.
Definitely. All right, thank you so much, Rob.
Yeah,
awesome show.
Yeah.
Have you on again.
Definitely.
Hyperchangers, if you guys want to support, definitely check out our Patreon page per usual, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Peace.